Just like that, we've blinked and it is finally the weekend. Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to a brand new edition of the Media Row podcast with me, Justin Miller, sponsored by Kelly's Little Nipper and Stevens Automotive and Sales. Happy to have everyone around here. Honestly, this week's been really cool. I have a lot more comments of just people reaching out and saying they really enjoy the show. And while I don't do the show just for people to tell me that it's good, it does mean a lot. And I appreciate that. It really does make my whole day when someone I don't know, or even people I do know, come up to me and say, I really enjoy listening. So it means the world. I love seeing the numbers grow each and every day, each and every show. So keep it going. Keep commenting, liking, subscribing, and rating. And let's keep growing this thing together. And we blink, and it's the end of this week. We're going to blink, and it's going to be football season, and we're going to have Coach Woodley on every week, and it's going to be a busy football season. Then it's going to be basketball season, and that's just chaos. That is just absolute chaos. So can't wait to be there right there with all you guys. But, you know, like we said when this show started, the summer months, they get a little slower, and that's when I want to bring on people that inspire me, that have helped me, that have been mentors to me. And today is someone that has been a mentor to me since my time at KXNO, and I thought this was a perfect way to wrap up this week since the Stanley Cup Finals wrapped up this week. We've tried to have him on multiple times, just our schedules didn't work out. But to the show for the first time is Ben Gislason, play-by-play announcer for your Iowa Wild. Wells Fargo Arena is going to be changing their name here soon, but you can go catch them at Wells Fargo Arena next season. We're going to talk everything from Stanley Cup, NHL recap, preview, AHL recap, preview, anything Iowa Wild fans should know. And just a little bit about his career, because he's been someone that has gotten to where he's at by just pure and hard work and dedication. And those are the people that kind of inspire me. So before we get to Ben, need to give a shout out to Kelly's Little Nipper at 1701 East Grand Avenue in Des Moines this weekend. Another great lineup of music. You can go check it out on their website or at Facebook. Go get some great food, great drinks, and great community over there at the historic Kelly's Little Nipper. And just have a great time. We mentioned earlier this week during our live read of just, it's such a perfect mix of everything. There's chaos, but it's a good chaos. And there's great people, and you meet new people that you don't think you would talk to outside. And it's just an awesome, awesome place. And Kelly's Little Nipper has been a staple here in Des Moines. And if you haven't been, you need to. 1701 East Grand Avenue in Des Moines. Great food, great drinks, better community over there at the historic Kelly's Little Nipper. When you go there, make sure to let them know that Media Row sent you. So, Ben, I guess the first question is, because with being a broadcaster, whether it's minor league baseball or if it's AHL hockey, you're always all over the place and you always have something to do, and hockey's a longer season. Is this finally the time you get to relax? Like, what do you do now on your free time?
It is. And first off, Justin, thanks for having me on. It's great to connect with you, and our paths crossed many years ago, and it's great to recross those paths again here today with you. This is the sweet spot of relaxation, if there is one, for at least for hockey, and we just recently had the Stanley Cup Finals come to an end. But for teams that are out, and the American Hockey League Calder Cup playoffs are still going on as we record this today. I think it's Game 4 is going on tonight, so they're almost done. The Stanley Cup got done a little bit before that final did. But once the year is over for whatever your organization is, there's a little bit of a dismount to the year. For me personally, the other side of the broadcasting role is team services. So handling player travel, both as a team and also individually, call-ups, send-downs. There's a lot that falls under that team services hat. But for the end of the year, it's just making sure that players get back to where they need to get back to, getting them reimbursed for their travel because that's team travel, so they don't pay for it completely themselves. And then once that's all done, there's a good stretch of time where it's really just random stuff that comes up. I'm not in the office every day. I'm not pounding out a travel schedule or prepping for a broadcast. There are no broadcasts to prepare for, so it's it's a it's a time where you reflect on the season, broadcast wise, what went well, team services wise, what went well, areas of my world of things that I control within my team services broadcasting world, what went well, what didn't go well, what can we do better? And then you start to make plans for the coming year. But the nice thing is, from I'd say about mid-September to April, everything is really urgent. Once you get past the end of the season and you're done and you get the players out, there's nothing that really comes up that's urgent at this point. So it's nice, it's light, it's a time to recharge, and you need it. Everybody that works in the throes of hockey needs a time to recharge, and that's where we're at right now. And it's a time you enjoy because it does go fast, and before we know it, we'll be dropping the puck for the 25-26 season.
Yeah, when you have an off season, do you have to turn off hockey for like a week just to like recharge, like you were saying? Or are you one of those guys where no, you were locked in with the Stanley Cup, you're watching the Calder Cup tonight and everything, or do you sit back and recharge?
It's a bit of both. And as my wife will tell you, she's maybe a more ferocious hockey fan than I am, if you can believe it. She is
Really?
a diehard hockey fan and just hockey. Like she has her team, but she also just it doesn't really matter if her team is involved or not. She just loves watching, and she probably watched probably more playoff games than I did. There were some times where I was up for weekends, guys' weekends, things like that. She was at home and she was watching the games if I was maybe out on a golf course or something like that. And so she watches it pretty religiously. For me, it's not an exact science. There's always one round that I sort of miss. The first round I'm all in on. The Calder Cup, I'll catch a game here and there. I don't watch it as as strictly as I'll try to watch the NHL playoffs, but I'll catch a game here and there just to see what's going on. I certainly keep up on the scores. I watch the AHL scoreboard a
Yeah,
lot
yeah.
to see what's going on. But the NHL, the first round, I try to watch every game I possibly can. And then the second round, it's not quite as strict. And usually the conference final is the one I sort of wind up just kind of missing. I'll catch a game here and there. And there's some nights where I'm just like, I'd rather watch a movie. I'd rather do something else, not have a television on, because there is a burnout factor for sure. And when you are inundated by it day in and day out, and I'm beyond blessed to get to do what I do, and I'm quite literally living my dream. So this is not a complaint, but you bring up a great question where when you do it every day, you live it every day, you see so many games, there's a point where you sort of go, not tonight. But once the final comes around, I watched every game of this final, and usually don't miss much of that because that's your last grasp at it for 3 to 4 months.
Yeah.
So you want to drink it in, and it's the pinnacle of our sport. I mean, it is every player giving every single bit that they have to every single minute of every single game, and that really brings out, I think, the humanity in everybody, and that's why we love it so much.
How much of your time during the off season are you sending demos to professional leagues like in the NHL? Are you trying to, because while in Iowa, we'd love to keep you forever, but it would be really cool to see you, broadcasting for an NHL team someday too. So is that part of your off season too?
It is, and that is the dream. It has been the dream of mine growing up in a broadcasting family, not play by play. My dad was on the sports reporting side for over 20 years, mainly with KSTP TV in Minneapolis. So I had a very unique experience of getting to be around sports, but he was a hockey guy too. So whenever he got a chance to cover a hockey story, he was doing it and he was often tagging me along. So that put me into that realm early. And so I've always wanted to reach the National Hockey League. However, I will say I am blessed to be in Des Moines, to be with the Iowa Wild, because this is a place that has a long runway. I don't look at where I'm at now and think, you know, in a couple more years here, I'm going to start getting real antsy, or I'm going to have outgrown this place. Like I don't think about that. I think that there are places in the American League that I couldn't see myself living for as long as I do in Des Moines. And so I'm really grateful for that, because it's a place that I can really just keep my head where my feet are. And that's something that I tell a lot. And you understand this, being in the broadcasting profession, mentors, people that you reach out to that reach back out and are helpful in helping you walk through the throes of your vocation. And what did I do wrong? What would you do differently if you were me? Things like that. And the one thing that I've heard from a lot of people, and even a couple that have reached the highest levels, is don't get so preoccupied in where you're trying to get to that you forget where you're at right now. And doesn't mean that I don't keep eyes on things. I do have an agent that helps me keep eyes on openings and knows people in not only the team realm hockey wise, but knows people, whether it's the broadcasting partners of these different teams. So it's nice to have that, because it means that I don't have to I feel like I don't have to be quite as diligent or quite as dialed in every single day on going on Teamwork Online or calling people or texting people. Because the weird thing about broadcasting is Teamwork Online exists. I know STAA is something
Mm-hmm.
that exists too, and that's almost like an elevated version of Teamwork Online. But oftentimes when those roles get posted on there, they've already been open for weeks, if not months at times. Like it's such a word of mouth business, and you have to sort of know somebody that knows somebody that can throw your name into the hat. And so that's where my agent, I'm really grateful for him and the work that he does to help me just stay plugged in on that. And then to finish, yeah, it's funny. I was just having a discussion this morning with a friend of mine. He was asking the same question, like, so what's the timeline? And I'm like, it could be tomorrow. If
Yeah. Yeah.
someone randomly retires and I happen to know somebody there or can get connected there and they like what I sound like, I could be gone. But it could also be 20, it could never happen. The right fit could never happen. So it's as far between tomorrow and never, and it's somewhere in between, and you can't focus on it because it's so hard to predict. And that's going back to what I said earlier, keeping your head where your feet are. I think I heard that from an NHL coach once upon a time, and I just went, that really is good. And I've stuck with that, because I think that's the best way to do it, is be prepared and be ready, because when that opportunity presents itself, you got to be ready to go. But also, if you spend so much time thinking about it, you're not going to do as well as you can do at the level you're at. And so that's what I try to live and preach every day. And it's funny how the more I've done that, the less I've been consumed by it. Because when you're young and you're ambitious, I'd lay awake at night thinking about, like, man, what's that phone call going to be like? And it was fun, but also it's sort of just wasted emotion too, because it's not making you any better or putting you any
Yeah.
closer to
Yeah.
getting there.
I didn't know that your dad was in sports broadcasting. Is that just kind of where the love of hockey came through?
Yeah, and growing up in Minnesota, I think my dad very quickly put me on skates. Very grateful for it. And yeah, I think you're sort of you're ushered into hockey right away. I think everybody at some point, in some way, shape, or form, tries to skate in Minnesota. I mean, I think whether you do it right away or whether you do it as a teenager with your friends or whether you get out there with it as an adult sometime, it's sort of a rite of passage up there. And obviously a lot of people wind up getting really into it, myself included. And yeah, some combination there with him of obviously loving hockey. He played in high school in Minnesota, and then again just stayed around the game so much when he was working as a sports anchor at Channel 5. So some combination there, I think, between his love of hockey and then, of course, his career in broadcasting, obviously put those two together, and you have me.
How much does that just help you? Because clearly, I mean, having a parent in the business is going to help you grow as a broadcaster. You can throw ideas out at them, have them listen to your tapes. But I would think that almost shows you from an early age how to balance the craziness of this business too, how you can balance having a family and still traveling and covering. Is that kind of what you gained from it too, from an early start?
No question. And it to this day, it's still invaluable to have someone with institutional knowledge like that, who not only is going to be available when I ask, but it's my dad. So he oftentimes is the one reaching out to me. I always say for the majority of people in this business, they have to seek out and find a mentor, be lucky enough to get connected to somebody that has been through what my dad went through. And for me to have somebody that not only has that knowledge, but is so willing to share it and also wants the utmost best for me. I mean, I couldn't have asked for anything more than that. And I owe a lot to his tutelage and his guidance. And you're right, not only vocationally, but just in how this world works, things that I am on the lookout for negatively. He has shared things with me like, hey, this is something that happened to me. You're going to want to keep your eyes out for this. Where a lot of people might have to experience that negative themselves and be burned by something and then go, oh, I'm going to watch out for that now. He was able to go, hey, this happened to me. Make sure it doesn't happen to you. So I've told him before, I'll say it again. I have an immense amount of gratitude for what his guidance and leadership in this has been. It's funny though, every year, and he still listens to every game, and we frequently, much like when I played, there's some sort of a post-game breakdown, a text. If I'm on the road and he knows it, he'll call me because there's usually some time to kill if we're at a back-to-back in Winnipeg and I'm just sitting in the hotel room. He'll frequently will call and kind of talk about it. And sometimes we'll talk about just the team because he's a hockey fan and he watches. And so he has team comments as much as he does broadcasting comments. But it's been fun over the years to, I think back to when I first started and he would send me screenshots of on his phone notes he would take during the game, like less here, more here. You were too excited here, not excited, little things here. And it's funny in the last year or so now, the majority of the time, it's just really enjoyed it. Like, don't have much.
That's kind of
So
cool.
it's been fun to watch the lessons and the critiques get less and less and less. And they're still there. And I'm not saying that to try to announce myself as arrived. I will never arrive. I don't think anybody ever arrives in this life at anything they do. We can always get better. But it's just been interesting and a little profound to watch the critique sheets go from 15 things to 10 things to 5 things to 2 things to just thoroughly enjoyed it tonight. Do it again tomorrow. Right. And so that's been an enjoyable part of the experience.
Did you, as a young broadcaster, take those critiques as well as you do now, or was that something you kind of grew into to appreciate? Because I remember like playing high school basketball and my dad would critique me, and there'd be days where I would get in my own head, like, you don't even know, like, I'm out there, blah, blah, blah. And now it's funny doing the podcast. My dad will send me text messages. Listen, this is what I think. And I appreciate it. And he even has gone up to me and been like, am I too rough? Am I like, are you cool with me doing this? And I'm like, yes, I need it. Were you that way right away, or were you like me and had to kind of grow into appreciating it?
I think there's a bit of both. And I also I can't necessarily point to an example, but I know that there have been times where I've said no to critiques and I've said, you know what? I don't agree. I'm not going to do that. I don't, for whatever reason, that just it wasn't something that I wanted to do, or I didn't agree with them, or I thought, no, that I don't think it sounds that way. That was probably later on than earlier. I think earlier I was pretty open to all of it. But to your point, when it's your dad, I think it's different than if somebody with no skin in the game gives you a critique because they're just going to give you exactly what they hear. And I think that there's some times where, and I'm blessed to have a father who would go through the wall for me. I think there's sometimes where I think my dad for sure thought I played a better game than I did, or made a better call than I did, or should be somewhere else than I am, or is better than this guy. I think he falls prey to that sometimes, and So there were times where I would kind of reel them back a little bit or scale them back a little bit on some things. And there were some times where, like I said, I just flat out, I thought about it and I went, you know what? I think you're wrong on that. And we agree to disagree.
With being a AHL broadcaster, you can do some pretty exciting stuff on air. You can bring in people. Have you ever thought about bringing in your dad for a broadcast, or even just doing a period for a game?
So we won't do it at the AHL level, and we've actually talked about it because when I was working for the Buccaneers, previous to working for the Iowa Wild, so working in the USHL, he would come down for one game a year, and he would be essentially kind of an analyst. It was kind of a just I don't know if we wouldn't have paired it around Father's Day because that's in June, but we did it once a year, and we did it for. Yeah, all 3 years I was there, we did it. And there's pictures and there's a lot of really enjoyable memories from those nights. That's not to disparage the USHL, but it just feels like, at least for me, and my dad totally agrees on this, for pro hockey, just doesn't feel like the right fit because he only played high school hockey. And I mean, like, for example, some of the analysts I've worked with, guys have had Pat McLetty, NHL experience. My current color commentator, Garrett Cecere, played in the ECHL, Northeastern University. Both he and I agree there's a level of credibility, hockey playing wise, that one needs to have to step in there and to do that. So we both just sort of agreed. We talked about it one night, and I was like, should I bring it up with our team president? And we both just sort of went, doesn't feel like the right move to do, and doesn't feel like the credibility would be there. But we do have those memories from the 3 games we did together with the Bucks, and I know he will certainly cherish those forever.
You bring up calling games for the Des Moines Buccaneers, and then were you in the marketing department for Iowa Wild? Because I always felt like the way you got to where you were at and are at now is very inspiring for a young broadcaster, of just really grinding through it. Of, man, you may not have the spot right now that you're wanting, but you're not letting that discourage you.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And it was more on the public relations media side than marketing, which does, and currently Alec Lesnar holds this role for us and does it oh so well. Um, Not a future broadcasting hopeful. I was a bit different in the time when I walked into that role. Oftentimes these roles they're not people that are trying to segue it into a broadcasting position where I was in an interesting spot when I took the PR media manager role with Iowa in 2021, right out of COVID, was I had actually been in discussions with the Wild during my final year with the Bucks because this goes against my previous point about how these NHL jobs come and go like this, which they normally do. But this was a situation where Minnesota, their only radio voice ever, Bob Kurtz, voice of my childhood. He was, I think he had pretty much told them he had 3 years left, maybe. He had told Minnesota that he was on the way out. It was public knowledge. And Iowa had also learned that their PR guy was going to take a job in St. Louis. He was going to go back home. And so, all in the middle of this, there's the PR role that they knew was going to open up. There's the radio role in Minnesota that they knew was going to open up. And in the middle of that is Joe O'Donnell, who was my predecessor in the broadcasting team services role. And he had been slowly 1 game, 5 games, 7, 8, 10 games filling in for Bob Kurtz in Minnesota. Now he was not the only one doing that, so it wasn't a guarantee by any means. And I know he didn't take it that way, that he was going to be the guy that would then fill in for Bob. But so it was this weird conjunction of, you had all these openings and you had Joe who might be going. And so I knew that was a possibility. And I also knew that no matter what, just getting into the American Hockey League, even if Joe doesn't get the Minnesota Wild job, which I think personally, I felt pretty confident just knowing his call, knowing how well the team and the organization loves him, knowing that he was going to be a pretty good option for them. But you don't know, and so there was a bit of just hope and faith in that, and trust me, I've said this before. There was no bigger proponent for Joe O'Donnell to get the voice of Minnesota Wild job outside of his very close friends and family than me and my wife, because we knew selfishly and personally what that could mean
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
me. And so I got in. It was a 30-game season. I actually did about half the games that year because Joe did, I think it was 15 Minnesota games that year in what would eventually be Bob Kurtz's final season. And then the summer was just a bizarre summer of waiting. And also just one thing, if Joe gets the job, that's no guarantee that I'm going to get his job either. Again, much like Joe felt, I'm sure he felt pretty good about his potential, and so did I. But if there's one thing that you need to learn in this business is that what you assume your expectations are, it's okay to believe and it's okay to hope, but you need to be prepared to hear something else too, because that can happen. So this whole summer goes along and we're just sort of Joe's sending me cryptic emails like, "Hey, if I get hit by a bus, here's what the flight manifests look like." And I'm like, "This has nothing to do with my PR role." And I'm like, "Hit by a bus means get the Minnesota job, right?" Like, again, because he didn't know either at that time. So there were I remember these fun cryptic interchanges where I'm just like, "Oh yeah, wink, wink, nudge, nudge." Like, you're trying to help me potentially prepare to take over for him. So that kind of happens all summer. And he doesn't get the Minnesota job until middle of September. And so, I mean, training camp for us starts at the end of the month. So it was for him too. It was a complete just ramp it up. He lived up there by himself for a while. His family, he's got kids and his wife, they stayed in Des Moines. So he got up there and just jumped in last second because that's when the hiring happened. And then I got it even later. And so then I was thrown into that world. And I owe a lot to Joe because I would have never made it through that first season. Broadcasting wise, I'd had enough of a background in it where I knew I could go in and step in and make it my own. But from the team services side, like I'd never done that, and they took a big leap of faith in me, probably just basing it off work ethic and just kind of knowing me, being within the organization, that I could step into that. And Joe, he always answered, he always tried to help, and was always there for me when something happened, and I was like, I don't know what to do here, and we're in San Diego, like what do I do? And he's like, do this. So those phone calls diminished a lot into I didn't really have to make many more of them the second season, but that first year, I made a lot of phone calls to
He was
Joe.
on speed dial.
Probably in, yeah, and he was probably in Seattle, and I was in Austin, Texas. But he was really helpful in making sure that I knew what to do because there was no time to train me in because of how late in the calendar year both of those promotions happened.
So how many years have you been now the main play-by-play voice for the Iowa Wild? Like
Well,
COVID messed with my head of timing. So like I feel like you've been there for 4 years, I want to say, but I could be wrong.
it happens to me all the time, and it's funny that one of these bus trips. I was thinking about it, and I had it wrong in my head because I always have to sort of add it up. I'm with you on the COVID thing because again, for me, it's weird because there was the 2021 season was really just 2021. It was February to April. That was when I was in the PR role.
Okay.
And so that was my first season. But I mean, there are people that would probably not even count that as a season if you asked them. There was no playoffs. They just crowned a regular season champion at the end of the year. And then I took over for Joe after that, and that was 21, 22. So 1, 22, 22, 23, 3, 24, 24, 25. So this will be, yeah, 120. See, I came to the math. 122, 22, 23, 23, 24. This will be my fifth year as the play-by-play voice. Technically, my sixth season, but again, that season is pretty loose when it's 30 games and there's no playoffs.
An asterisk next to it.
Yes, definitely an asterisk. Yes.
But with this past season with the Iowa Wild, what would be like the grade that you'd give this team? What did you see from them and just kind of yeah, what you learned about the Iowa Wild this season?
It's so hard to grade because what 99% of the rest of sports grades on is winning alone.
Yeah.
And it is important, and it is an important part of the Iowa Wild in the American Hockey League. But if you ask Minnesota, and there was an article that just came out in The Athletic about this, the mandate is not winning. Like that was a public discussion that happened on The Athletic the other day, and when I hear that, when you read that at face value, it's almost kind of shocked by it. Working internally, we know this. And the other thing that I've talked to a few of our fans, this article came out and they're like, what how can they do this? And I'm like, I don't want people to read that as they don't care about winning, because that could not be further from the truth. I've seen explosions after games in coaches' rooms. I've seen players break sticks. Like, they care about winning. But to go back to your question, when you evaluate a team and you evaluate an American Hockey League team, the key is development. And it is, did players leave the year better off than they started the year? And the answer to that is yes. It's weird in hockey to look at it as an individual sport because it's not. But in the American League, it is a little bit. And I mean, I wouldn't give them an A, but I mean, I'd probably give them a B plus on the year, because there were certainly some players that did not grow the way that they wanted to grow. And that's where I wouldn't give them into the 90% and higher, because I know that and I'm not going to name those players, but I know there were some guys that they wish would have come along a little further than where they're at now. But there were also players like Carson Lambos on the defensive side who had a brilliant season. I mean, really took some marvelous strides and was playing huge minutes as a defenseman at the end of the year, just his second year pro, off of a very frustrating rookie season. He was the first person, I remember having him on our podcast at the end of the year, and he didn't sugarcoat his year at all. He was like, I'm leaving sour and I'm not happy with it and I'm going to be better. And boy, was he. I was incredibly impressed by his game at the end of the year. It's a team that gave up a lot of goals. They gave up a lot of goals. And I believe at the end of the year, he was a plus player. So plus minus is, you get scored on, you get a minus, you score, or you don't even have to score. But if I'm on the ice and my team scores, I get a plus. And he was a plus player on a very minus team. Usually when you play the most minutes as a defenseman on a team that gives up as many goals as the Iowa Wild did, you are not plus. You are very negative, and he was not. He was a plus player on a team that struggled to keep the puck out of their net, and that says a lot about his game. I think he's someone that took massive strides. I look at Hunter Haight, who scored north of 20 goals as a rookie, and as a drafted player, a young player. He was 19, turning 20, coming into the American Hockey League, a monstrous jump from the OHL to the AHL. OHL is junior hockey in Canada, and he right away made an impact. A couple hat tricks. He led the team in goals. He might not have led the team in goals. I have to double check that, but he was right there with. And I think maybe Travis Boyd had the edge in that. But he was right there, one of the top scorers on the team. Played center, which is a challenging. It's the most challenging skating role in hockey. Goalie is the most challenging position. There's no refuting that. It's a challenging job to play center because you're expected to contribute and you're expected to defend at all times. And he won faceoffs. He managed being a center in a big league full of men as a 19-year-old really well. And then speaking of goaltenders, Samuel Halavai, undrafted Slovakian goaltender who they signed out of free agency last year, who I'd have to double check the math on this, but I think he had 13 or 14 wins throughout the whole season. Doesn't seem great, but I think it was 9 or 10 of those that came in the last 2 months of the season. So there was a light bulb that went on somewhere around 2024 into 25 into January, where something snapped and he figured it out, and he was damn near unbeatable towards the end of the season. And Minnesota's really excited about him because he's got a long way to go to be an NHL goalie, but to see what he was when he started the year and to see what he was when he finished the year, and you just think about people's ceilings and their aptitude for growth. And I mean, this guy took a gigantic leap from where he was at the beginning of the season to where he was at the end of the year. And he has a barrel of a chest. His arms look like Michael Phelps with
Yeah,
arms.
yeah.
For goalies are is he everything because he takes up so much of the net. And so if he's just structurally strong because he's so big, there's not a lot to shoot at. And when he needs to be for a guy, I think he's 6'4" and he's at least 220. I mean, he's a big guy and he's really athletic. I mean, he'll make some just mesmerizing saves where you're like, how does a guy it's like watching a lineman move in
Yeah.
football. Like, how do these guys move like that? And at Halavai, it's like, how does he contort his body that way when you see him off the ice and you're like, he looks like a professional wrestler. I mean, that's the other side of it that has Minnesota really excited and us in Iowa really excited because he'll be our starter this year. Is he's got all this athletic ability, but there's some things that he was born with to be this wide and this broad. You can't go to the gym and create that. You either have it or you don't, and he's got that. So, and there are other players too that really came on well. Jack Peart, a second round draft pick who did not start the year where he wanted to be, as most rookie defensemen don't. I don't think anybody expects anybody to come in as a defenseman and a rookie and really to light it up. But he was playing heavier minutes on the back end towards the end of the year. David Spacek, another defenseman, contributed offensively really well. And really upped his contributions as an offensive defenseman last year. So there was a lot of growth for some players that needed to be seen for Minnesota to be happy with where it went. And there were a lot of players they were really happy with. So a long answer, but there was a lot of positives in a season where, they missed playoffs for the second straight year by a decent margin. And the wins and losses weren't there. And that's where you look at my grade and you think, really? I mean, a team that was that far below 500, you give a B+ to, but I really would because the metrics for how you grade an AHL team are different than
It's
most.
similar to like minor league baseball. Like
Yes,
if
absolutely.
Shota Imanaga goes out there and pitches 12 strikeouts tonight, but the team loses, I think most Cubs fans are like, "Oh, that's good news."
They're thrilled.
Like
Yep.
that's how I think a lot of people need to look at it too. But with you being in the AHL, you get to see all these NHL teams, building development. And so, with the Stanley Cup finals finishing up, the season over for the NHL, I'm going to ask you to do a little way too early preview for the NHL, but basing off of the teams you get to watch and their development and growth, is there a team maybe that is flying under the radar that you think next season, just with their development, could be a factor in next year's Stanley Cup?
That is a fabulous question. And I don't think it's hard to say there's a team flying under the radar that's going to be a Stanley Cup contender because of their AHL team. It's a long road to see the payoff there.
Mhm.
The AHL helps you establish long-term success. There's not going to be a team that because of who they had in the AHL this year, they're going to all of a sudden thrust themselves into the spotlight. So I wouldn't call them a contender, but if I'm understanding your question correctly, who are the teams that have prospects that can really jump in and
Yeah.
maybe
Yep.
drive a team? I mean, Minnesota has some really good prospects down here. I don't know if I see the opportunity for them in Minnesota because they're only going to add. They're coming off the Parisi Suter cap crunch, so they're only going to add, which is actually going to push some players down to us, which will help Iowa. Wild fans in Des Moines should be happy about that because with having, I think it was 14 million in cap space tied up for the last 5-7 years, I forget the number of it. Minnesota had to rely on a lot of the veteran type AHL players that we had to come up and fill a third line hole or a fourth line hole. That might not be the case this coming season. So you might get to see a lot more of the team that you anticipated to see for more of the year, which is always a predictor of success in the AHL. Injury is a part of it, but also having to play cap gymnastics like Minnesota did has not helped Iowa. So I don't know if I see Iowa guys going up and really helping drive that team, mainly because, again, they're going to add. They're going to bring in players. They're going to make trades. They're going to use the money they've got to push some of those bottom tier guys down and up their ability to maybe go after a cup. I mean, I'm very excited for the Minnesota Wild season next year. And it's the most exciting offseason since they signed Zach Parise and Ryan Suter, which really ended poorly. But at the time, as a Minnesotan, it was really fun when they did sign those guys. Anyway, a team that I think about, and it's a combination of who they have in their ranks, American League wise, and opportunity, is Detroit. And we see Grand Rapids a lot, and they've had very good teams the last 2 seasons. And yes, part of that is they've got great veterans out there that any team that wins in the American Hockey League has great veterans, guys that can contribute and lead. And they have had that. Dominic Shine, outstanding veteran, great player in Grand Rapids. They've had veteran goalies, but they also have some younger players that I think are going to jump in there and could be really good backfilling players for them. I mean, Amadeus Lombardi had an incredible year for Grand Rapids this year. He missed most of the season due to injury. He came back and was well over a point a game in the last 25 games of the year, I think, and was just an impact player, fast, creative, crafty. And then Sebastian Kosa out there, their goaltender for Grand Rapids, is young. He's talented, and they've moved him along the right way. They haven't rushed him along. Goalies, if you rush them along, it can hurt them long term. And I give them credit for how patient they've been with him, and he was fantastic for them this year in goal. So they'd be a team that I would think you could start, and we've actually seen even some of that in the current model of the Red Wings. Simon Edvinsson was a Grand Rapids Griffins player 2 years ago, played big minutes for the Red Wings on their blue line. There's a Marco Casper jumped in there this year after a year in Grand Rapids 2 years ago, and he was fabulous for them. So you're seeing some of these players walk into the Red Wings and contribute. Jonathan Berggren was really good for them. He was in and out of Grand Rapids for 2-3 seasons before going up there full time last year. And so you're seeing that they have some of the availability in the room for these AHL guys to come up and make a difference. So that would be my team that I would look to maybe see fill in some slots with some AHL guys that seem ready to go. And they're also they're not quite where Minnesota is, where Minnesota is getting into this win now window. Detroit's trying to get into kind of where Minnesota's at, where they're right on the precipice. They're on the cusp. And so to me, that's a team that might be more apt or likely to draw out of the AHL, where Minnesota's going to go, we need to get guys that are ready to jump in right now, contribute, help us get past that first round and make a deep run in the Stanley Cup playoffs.
So Ben, thank you so much for doing this for me. It's been way too long since we've been able to catch up. I'm going to connect Caitlin Clark to hockey right here. Because have you seen the news this week of her teammate stepping in and helping her out, and maybe in an aggressive way? And WNBA fans, they're ready to sign petitions to try to kick her out. There's teammates that are pissed. There's other teams that are pissed. But as a hockey guy, isn't that the teammate you want? Caitlin Clark gets pushed and she comes flying in to help. That's hockey 101 right there, isn't it?
It's wolf pack mentality. You're exactly right. I will, I don't take many controversial stances in my line of work, but I'll totally stand on that. I'm totally pro. God, it's funny. I just saw her name on Twitter. Was it what was her name
Cunningham.
again? Yes, Cunningham. Yeah, I was looking at it earlier today actually, and I was like, right on. I mean,
that's how I felt.
Not just because it's Caitlin Clark, and I mean, granted, as a transplant Iowan, I had a blast watching her play for the Hawkeyes, and have kept tabs on her as we all have after she, joined the Fever. But why would you not at any sport, whether it's a high contact sport like football or hockey, or if it's golf, you want people that stand up for you, and you want if you get wronged, you want your teammates to be there for you, and that's exactly what Cunningham did, and I'm all for it. I think if someone's gonna in hockey, it's pretty simple. If someone cheap shots your teammate, there's no thinking. It's you
Gloves
go
are off,
and it's not necessarily you're not going out there to hurt anybody, but you're going out there to set the tone and say you did something that we're not okay with, and we're going to respond. And you don't get to do that again. And if you do, there are going to be repercussions. You nailed it. That's Hockey 101. It's been Hockey 101 forever. I don't think, even though fighting is lessened in the game, that element of hockey, I don't think will ever change. And if it does, I don't know if I'll want to be a part of the sport anymore, to be honest, because I think it's one of the elements of our game that makes it so unique and so enjoyable.
Yeah, it was funny because I was just at a buddy's house and we are watching ESPN and the news of Cunningham pops up and all of us were like, no, like that's what you do for your teammate. And let alone she's the best basketball player in the world right now. But yeah, it doesn't matter. So, but Ben, again, thank you again so much for doing this for me. Uh, this is your off time, you get to try to go on vacations and to be able to come on the show means a lot.
Oh, it was a ton of fun, Justin. A real treat having you on. And yeah, we'll look forward to seeing you out at an Iowa Wild game this fall.
Absolutely. I'll be wearing the Dunlop Chiefs jersey from
I love
Slapshot.
it. I love it.
Huge thank you to Ben Gislason for hopping on the show. He's been someone that has helped me get to where I'm at, someone that I've asked multiple questions back when I'd produce his show, or his games, I should say, at KXNO in between commercial breaks. Like, he's probably trying to stay focused on the game, and I was probably just a jerk, just constantly in his ear, like, hey, I have a question. As someone trying to be a broadcaster, and like he never made me feel like I was a jerk. But looking back on it, I was like, man, maybe let the guy finish the game. Hockey's a very intense, it's all over the place. And here's this, 19, 20-year-old kid asking him questions constantly. But he was great and he was awesome on the show. So I really appreciate Ben hopping on and talking some hockey with us. But before we wrap up today's show and wrap up this week of the Media Row podcast, give a shout out to Stevens Automotive and Sales at 5320 Northwest Beaver Drive in Johnston, Iowa. 35 years of family owned and operated. Those are the people you're going to be dealing with. They're people, first off, just great people. Like, so easy to talk to. They're wonderful people. They're always going to make sure they're doing their best work for you and the vehicle. And so that's just a golden star right there. But two, they are great at communicating. They are going to tell you exactly what's happening, what's going on with your car, keeping you updated to make sure you're on schedule to get back on the road safely. And then third and finally, and one of my favorite reasons why I go to Stevens Automotive, just absolutely no BS out of them. They shoot it to you straight, and they're not going to upcharge you for any ridiculous stuff. They're not going to change your windshield wipers like some places do randomly without even asking, and then like, oh, well, we changed your windshield wiper fluid, and that's going to be $100 and blah, blah, blah. No. Stevens Automotive, absolutely great people. Make sure that we get out on the road safely, and they're just wonderful, wonderful people to be involved with. So go check them out at 5320 Northwest Beaver Drive in Johnston, Iowa. 35 years of family owned and operated. They're the people you want dealing with your car. When you go to Stevens Automotive and Sales, make sure to let them know that Media Row sent you. So that will do it for this week. Again, a huge, huge thank you to all of our guests throughout this week. A huge thank you to Ben Gislason again for hopping on today. And always, always thank you to the listeners and people commenting, liking, subscribing. Always appreciate that. You guys have a safe and fun weekend. We will see you Monday for a new episode of the Media Row podcast.